Okay, so we are at the l'Institut Pascal in France, and we will meet a special person coming from MIT, sorry, and so she will present herself.
Hello, and thank you for the invitation to discuss my ideas and work about urban mobility with you. My name is Katja Schechtner, and I usually describe myself as a global nomad, that while I am working as a research affiliate with MIT and a visiting scholar since 2010, I'm also working a lot in actually implementing urban mobility projects across Asia, where I worked with the Asian Development Bank, and then for many years I progressed and implemented and developed and negotiated urban and transport technology policies globally at the OECD in Paris. So I see myself as someone who is an urban scientist, who does research, but also makes sure that our cities are kept on the move with real hardcore infrastructure projects and real hardcore negotiated policies that many countries then align to.
Okay, that's very interesting. So in regard to your discipline or your way to work, what is an inclusive city in relation to mobility, individual and singularity maybe too?
So I have approached city planning and urban design a lot through the lens of mobility and transportation over the last 20 years. Not only I look at other factors too, but as the movement through cities and across the planet is something that I find inherently interesting and exciting. After 20 years, I focused very much on that. And within this, of course, how we can allow or create or plan or enable access for all has been a constant baseline vibration through my work. And with access for all, I mean two things. I really mean accessibility of different parts of cities through a multitude of mobility options based on the spatial location of living where people have their homes and not. So this is not related to questions of physical impairments. It's more spatial inequalities, or how we could create cities in a better way so that many people can access many different parts of the city and amenities. That is one part of the inclusivity that I strive for, a large diversity of people visiting, going to work, shopping, leisure activities in different parts of the city. I think that's very important also for social inclusivity. And the other part of inclusivity that I've learned a lot about actually in my work in Asia is about how to include people that are handicapped in some way compared to people who never have to think about how they get around. For whatever reason that is, that might be mental problems, that might be anxiety, for example, or that might be physical limitations, or that might even be just temporary sickness.
Yes.
When, you go in for your cancer treatments, you probably, as much as you love public transportation, you're very happy that there is individual cars, or at least a taxi system where you don't share the space during chemotherapy with others. So for me, this is very much about thinking about people that either temporarily or for longer term have an impairment or a difficulty to access the city. And why did I find that and learn about that so much in Asia? Well, I've worked really in developing countries, and the projects we did is really for developing nations and cities that are not comparable to anything you know from Canada or Europe or the US. And when I started working on this, I thought from how bad it is and how little access they have, and a lot of time the mud roads and the really unsafe transportation mechanisms that are still pulled by people. I thought we should go for one next step, but not necessarily from the beginning include the idea of full handicapped design with every kind of ramp and, you know, whatever we do, and border, I don't know what the name is.
It doesn't have to be intrusive, the change that we made, in that sense, you mean?
No, I thought like, okay, we can, the situation there is so dire in many ways. It would be outrageous or wrong to jump immediately to this standards that we have, like let's say in Europe, or I mean, if you've ever been to Switzerland, in Switzerland for access for all, for inclusive design, for universal design, for, you know, making it possible for people with any kind of impairment, whether it's hearing or wheelchairs or so, to access the public transportation system. But I've learned that that was wrong. My perception to not immediately go full in, but just, you know, use less money and probably a lesser kind of guidelines to make it possible first for mostly able people, and then later sink on and have the handicapped people still rely on their friends and their society. That's what I thought in the beginning, because it's also very expensive to build the infrastructure from it. But I've learned that as through those projects you cannot, you know, revamp the whole transportation system at the beginning. You build one bus line, you build one metro line. I've learned that you should actually go for the highest standards possible from the very beginning for inclusivity, because that then can act as beacons and shine of lights, and at least one line, even if you can't, you know, upgrade them all, where people see how inclusivity can be meant, what it can mean, how good this access is, and also like how good this access is then for everybody when the stairs are, you know, manageable and the ramps work, and you don't end up having to like nearly climb into the next bus or all these kinds of things. Or as a wonderful project in Peshawar in Pakistan taught me, where the Asian Development Bank implemented a bus rapid transit system. In this society, they made it possible to have reserved seats for people, for transgender people. And they actually labeled it for them. So they have a woman compartment, they have male compartments, and then they labeled, because that way they made it visible. Yeah? And they were very clever about going, I mean, you respect the culture, nevertheless, but you also show the culture that there is something else that needs respect.
It's a way to communicate changes.
Communicate change, provide one good line where like the women feel comfortable. So it's wonderful, the guy who runs this BRT system, the Pakistani who does it, is excited to present that for the door handles in the parts where the women more use the bus rapid transit system, they have it lower because the women are smaller. And this is not discriminatory, it's just like they are smaller.
It's physically smaller.
And also they have a lot of things like, so I've learned that, yes, sometimes you have to make amends for what's possible in building a new transportation or mobility systems, in you know, upgrading the sidewalks from no sidewalks to mud sidewalks to, you know, gravel sidewalks to at least have, you know, kind of, but sometimes you should go all in and go for the best thing, like you would have it in the most inclusive city you can imagine, to have a beacon of light.
Okay. And even if you at MIT you work with different a team of different coming from different discipline, how does it impact? Does that way of thinking impact the way of thinking inclusivity and mobility? And
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is a little difficult for me to answer because I came to technology research, to building transportation models as an architect from the very beginning. This is my background. I'm an architect and an urban planner first. But for some absurd coincidence, when I was 13, I learned programming.
Okay.
That was in the 80s, so I'm really ancient.
Yeah.
As are my computer skills. Let me talk to you about basic Pascal and Commodore 64. Nevertheless, at the time when this smart city idea came up, I had already bridged the ideas about architect, morphology, aesthetics design, and being able to program simply and understand the technology. And for that, I was always open in this regard. And my friends were electrical engineers and computer scientists and mechanical engineers building machines. And of course artists, because this is what I naturally gravitated to. And then at MIT Media Lab, when I joined them in 2010, this was for me like some idea of like coming home or finding my own, because we actually there say it's not only about interdisciplinarity, but about antidisciplinarity. Bring together things that you, from your own discipline, probably consider ridiculous as someone else coming to you who wants to do weaving technologies, which is which is lovely, but I mean, seriously? And then you work with these people, with sound engineers, with pianists, with the most nerdy nerds you can imagine. Come to MIT once and you'll know what I mean. And you bring them together and you work together, and out of this you create something that is both efficient and beautiful. And I think we must create cities and we must create urban mobility systems and experiences that have both, that have the higher efficiency, so we can basically save the planet. But the planet will not only be saved if it's efficient. As humans, we also want to have beautiful experiences and aesthetic joy when we move around. And I think inclusive design, when it's done right, not when it's done in a very engineering way that is not touching upon the things we feel good about, but just reminds us of what's bad, or what, we could be old and sick and handicapped, then it's done right. So what I really liked about the presentation you did yesterday is that you've been working with this wonderful fascinator hat, which is basically something, a fashion item, something that adorns you, something that makes a statement, but through an aesthetic that's pleasurable and fun and enjoyable, and not just by trying to minimize the potential idea of seeing that someone is hearing impaired. And that's what I strive for too.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. And thanks for your presentation. Bye-bye.
Yeah.